I'd like to introduce our speaker today, John O'Mears. He and I have known each other since we shared an exchange student about 10 years ago. And he is the director of the Metroparks system, which I really believe is one of the true gems of Columbus, Ohio. My wife and I get out and use them as often as we can, and I'd be willing to bet if I asked for a show of hands, the majority of the people in the room also use that Metroparks system. While sitting with John, I found out a lot of new things are going on, so I'll let him tell you about it. But one of the things I'm excited about is they're expanding all the bike trails, and I've always been an avid bicyclist as long as I can remember. So without further ado, the director of the park system, John O'Mears.
Thank you, Mick. Good afternoon. Good to be back here at Dublin Rotary, and I am a downtown Rotary Club member, so I get to get out and visit some other clubs this way. I'm going to focus today on what's new in the Metroparks. So I'm hoping that most of you know about at least the close by Metroparks, and you've been to them many times, as Mick said. And you'll see one of my slides. I'm actually comfortable with that notion of seeing the rate of hands, because we know from our surveys that 80% of the people in Franklin County actually use our park system. So it's a great majority you actually get out either into the parks themselves or into the trails that we manage, like the Olentangy Trail. I'm going to focus, of course, the focus of Metroparks is a little different than most of the municipal recreation systems. We are focused more on conservation. Certainly lots of people come to our parks for recreational activities. We have a great trail system, but our park system by law is in fact focused on conservation of natural resources in Central Ohio. And we're conserving natural resources both for people and for wildlife. Metroparks today, we have 17 open Metroparks. That's probably more than... How many have actually been to all 17 of our parks? I should ask that question. All right, a couple of you claiming that. All right, good. Over 27,000 acres, so we are one of the largest landowners certainly in the region. We do keep 90% of our parks as natural area. That if there will be trails through those areas, but other than that, the visitor facilities are kept on to about 10% of the land. The majority is kept as more natural space for people and for wildlife to enjoy. We have over 200 miles of trail in the system now, so including the regional trails that we manage as well as the trails in the park system. And we have a critical focus on protecting rare species, so we'll talk more about that as well. Visitor attendance, about 7.5 million visitors a year, so we are one of the... If we were a tourist destination, we don't call ourselves a tourism agency because, in fact, it's mostly locals that use parks. But if we were a tourism, we would be the largest tourist agency in the region. And that's not including... We haven't yet figured out a good way to count all the people on the trails. There's too many ways to come in. As you know, if you get to the Olentangy, you come in one block, get off the next block, so forth, so on. There's lots... some people go for, 10 or 20-mile-an-hour ride, and some people just come and use a short stretch of the trail. So we don't have a good way of counting that. So again, let me talk a little bit about protecting the habitat for people and the things we're doing for people. And again, my focus here today is on the new things that are happening in the Metroparks system. The 200 miles of trails, and certainly the trails have been around for a long time, but we're doing some fantastic expansion of the trail system. We're doing lots of work on the trail. One that we're working on hard is Representative Duffy here. I know he's a member of your club. He's not here then. He was very helpful, and he's helping us work on. We are working to extend the Olentangy Trail up and into High Bank. So that's something we're looking at as a logical northern terminus. Actually, it won't really be a terminus because we've already tied some of the trails in southern Delaware County into High Banks. So what we're really looking to is extend the Olentangy Trail up and through High Banks Metropark. So you'll be able to, those of you who live in Worthington, hopefully in a few years, will be able to ride up into the park. And certainly people from the north ride south, and that of course opens up its options as a transportation route as well as a recreation. Certainly we know lots of people already ride the trail, going to work at Ohio State or Epitel or even downtown. I think when we connect with the southern Delaware County, a lot more people will be using that for transportation. We have lots of different types of trails, and perhaps more than you know. We actually have a mountain biking trail down Chestnut Ridge, for instance, considered the premier one in Central Ohio. We have lots of horseback riding trails. Mick referenced them as bike trails. We like to think of them as multi-use trails. We get all sorts of people doing all sorts of activities on the trails. We try to get them to play well together. Most of the time they do. And we're adding more trails every year, and I'll talk a little bit more about some of the trails that are coming soon. One of our newest parks, almost complete, is called Scala Audubon Metropark. It's right near downtown. This has the Audubon Center in it. The Audubon Center is the only complete environmental education center in the heart of a major American city. So we're that close to downtown. It's focused on providing environmental education activities to the inner city kids. Lots of programs for adults as well at that site. That park has kind of a dual nature. Half the park is managed sort of for the environmental education and related activity. The other half of the park is really targeting the people who live and work in the downtown area. And a lot of those people who live and work downtown are young professionals, so we have some new and different sorts of things trying to make Columbus a place that is, in fact, attractive to these young professionals. So we're working with the business community. We know they want to keep those young professionals here in Greater Columbus, and so we're doing some different things here. So on the left there, you'll see the climbing wall. That's actually the largest free outdoor climbing wall in America. It is a very challenging. Yes, you can actually go up and around those arches in there. There's a couple different arches. You're only seeing part of the wall in this picture. So those of you who are interested in that sort of challenging outdoor activity, that's a great place to do that. We also had actually Columbus Rotary installed a obstacle course at the same park this past fall, opened up in October. The obstacle course is a full military-style obstacle course. So those of you who have fond memories of your days in training. Yeah, exactly. Can go back, but it's a popular activity. It's a different, challenging outdoor activity that is bringing in lots of folks who, as you're all aware, there's lots of people who like to do lots of challenging physical activities, keep in shape in a variety of ways, and the obstacle course is one more way that's available here in Columbus now that's available again nowhere else in Ohio. I mentioned the Audubon Center, so this is a partnership with the Audubon. That park, I should mention, is a partnership with the City of Columbus and with Audubon. So Audubon actually did the fundraising project to build and manage and operate the Environmental Education Center in our park. We are in the process of creating 3 new Metroparks here in Franklin County. And this was part of our levy commitments in our 2009 levy. We were back asked and voted for continued funding in 2009. At the time, we did promise to complete these 3 new parks. With some funding cuts that we and other governments suffered in the last few years, we're actually a little behind where we hoped to be, but nonetheless, we've got good progress. Walnut Woods, I'll talk about first. So Walnut Woods is in southeast Franklin County. It's between Groveport and Canal Winchester. It is open. It is mostly finished already. We have some very nice facilities in there. We're still building some additional trails this year. Trails in the park. There'll be actually be about 10 miles of paved trail in the park. And in the next few years, we plan to have those trails connected to both Canal Winchester and Groveport cities, so tying into, again, the regional trail systems. Rocky Fork Metropark is a new park we're working up in the northeast part of the county. We actually opened bids last week for Rocky Fork. So Rocky Fork, we've been buying land again. It's another one of our partnerships. You'll hear me use the word partnership several times. We do lots of things in partnership with both private and other public agencies. Rocky Fork is actually a partnership with the City of Columbus, the City of New Albany, and Plain Township, all working together to create a new Metropark in that location. We own about 1,000 acres in that area that have been bought over the last few years since our levy. And this year we're going to get the first phase of development done. So by this fall we will have parts of that park open and ready to visit. And the new parks, what we've bid on, some picnic shelters, some, of course, restrooms. We'll put in a nice dog park in there. We're going to have an outdoor natural play areas. I'll talk a little bit more about them in a bit. And again, some great trails there as well. So that park's coming along. Again, be open by this fall. And then we have a new park that we will be getting started on next year in Grove City. So this is along the Scioto River, southern Franklin County. Grove City contributed the first couple hundred acres to the park, and we've been able to acquire. We're up to about 620 acres for that park now. It stretches about 2 miles along the Scioto River in southern Franklin County. It's actually a very beautiful stretch of river. Years ago, the Scioto River south of Columbus was a bit of a sewer. The Clean Water Act, however, worked. It's been cleaned up significantly, and it's a beautiful stretch of river now. So it's a great place, and we're looking forward to getting that park open about a year and a half from now. Talk a little bit about the trails. I'll talk a little bit more about those now. So our goal is to have a 160-mile interconnected trail system. And when I say our goal, I'm using that term very broadly. It is a partnership, Metroparks, and all sorts of other government, primarily government agencies. City of Columbus is the biggest partner. They've built more of the trail system, but certainly Worthington, Matt. We work cooperatively with them, the section of trail there, as well as pretty much every other suburb in Columbus. We're working cooperatively to create a regional trail system. It's about half done now. About half of the 160 miles are actually completed and open at this time. About 10 more miles will be built this year. So there's a lot of good work being done by a variety of agencies in Central Ohio moving that forward. Certainly the Olentangy Trail, I'm sure you're all familiar with. It's the best known. It's actually the Olentangy Trail is the most heavily used trail in Ohio. So if that won't surprise those of you who have been on it on a sunny Saturday afternoon. But it's a great trail system. These trails are very popular, well appreciated. For those who aren't aware of it, Metroparks manages most of the regional trail system. We don't do it in all the suburbs, but certainly in the city of Columbus and all the townships, we are the managing agency for the regional trails. Mid-Ohio Regional Planning Commission is also an important partner with that. They help all the agencies cooperate and make sure the trails meet at good boundaries and logical places. Educational programming was another one of our levy commitments. That's not necessarily something new for Metroparks. We've been doing it actually since almost 70 years we've been around. But we've expanded, and particularly we've had two major focuses that have expanded in the recent years. One is we've actually increased our educational programming for school children. We now, for instance, have every fifth grade class in Columbus City Schools participating in programs in the Metroparks. And this is not a single program. This is not a single field trip they come out to. It's a comprehensive educational program where our staff goes to the parks. We do teacher training. We go to the schools. We get the kids out. They do hands-on experiments. It's been tied to their science achievement requirements. And one reason every Columbus school participates is because they've been able to demonstrate how much better their students do when they get these hands-on experience. There are just some topics they learn better with good hands-on experience than you can learn from a textbook. And so we've been working with the schools on that, and we work with all the other school districts as well. The other major initiative in recent years is our programming for senior citizens. So if you aren't aware, we're offering a lot more programs for people 50 and over in our park system. I brought our park scope on. There's some copies on each table. Our programs are listed on. We call it our Metro 5.0 program. So if you want to look for a program for other people, if you're looking for a hike and don't necessarily want to try to keep up with the 20-somethings, there's some great opportunities for activities like that, and that we focus our programs on. Another part of our educational program, so we've had nature centers in some of our parks on the north and the east side of the town for a long time. And about a year and a half ago, we finally opened up a nature center on the west side. So over at Patel Darby Creek Metro Park, we now have a nature center that's open. It's a great new site. It is we're looking for LEED certification, which is a highly energy efficient building. So we tried to minimize the environmental impact both in the construction process, the ongoing impacts, as well as creating a building that minimizes use. It's a fantastic new building. We actually tried to build in some things that you don't see anywhere else. One of the features inside the building is a 53-foot long flowing stream through the building. So it's in a sense, it's a glorified aquarium, but it's one where the water's flowing. We tried to bring a little bit of Darby Creek up into the building, so you can come in there. It is designed for hands-on activity. If you haven't caught a crayfish, I know some of you grew up playing in the local creeks, catching crayfish or fish and so forth. You're actually allowed in this flowing stream to go in there and try to do that. We have ways for the kids to crawl underneath, look from the bottom, look up inside. Typically, we have about 25 of the native species of fish in there. We also designed it's got the crayfish, it's got some of the insects, it's got the small fish, it's got the big fish. It's a nice way, say, a good snapshot of a good healthy stream system in Central Ohio. One of the things, I did not know fish like to be petted. We've learned since we put this in, there are some fish that like to be petted. So that's just, again, we encourage hands-on activities, and that was one of the new things that surprised all of us. I mentioned natural play areas before. One of the phenomena that we are trying to address is that we're actually into our second generation of people who did not grow up playing outdoors as much as probably most of us in this room did. So those of you certainly my age grew up, that was what you did. You went outside. If you're like our house, my mother told me to get outside and go do something. Nowadays, kids play with electronic gadgets far more often. They play outside. We're seeing the impacts on both their mental and physical health. Diabetes is becoming rampant among kids. Lots of other issues developing. We know, the doctors know very well that outdoor play is one of the most effective ways to deal with a variety of things. They learn all sorts of social skills that they don't learn elsewhere. Unstructured play is actually more beneficial to kids than structured play is. And so lots of things. So we're encouraging kids in particular, kids of all ages, if you will, to get outside and play. We're actually creating areas in our parks. We're calling them natural play areas where we're saying it's okay to do things. We used to tell them never, don't hurt the animals, all those sorts of things. Don't climb the trees. We're now saying we want kids out there, and we're willing to do some new and different things, trying to get kids back. And in these natural play areas, yes, you can build a tree for it. You can go chase the butterflies, catch the butterflies, do whatever else you want to do. Just play hide and seek in the woods. So we're creating a new safe area. We've actually found out we are now giving programs for parents who have never played outdoors themselves and don't know how to let their kids play outdoors. So if you're wondering how far that's gone, we have reached the point where there's a generation, we're on our second generation, who just, for whatever reason, doesn't play outdoors. Conservation, I'm going to switch gears a little bit and talk about the conservation side of our mission. So since in the last 15 years, we've acquired about 14,000 acres. We are the largest agency restoring habitat in the state of Ohio. We've actually restored about 8,000 acres. So those are your favorite parks. Most of them were not forest and field when we bought them. Most of them were probably farm ground when we bought them, and we had to restore them and change them and make them more beautiful sites, if you will. And we continue that ongoing process as we buy new land and we created new parks. So we are a state leader in stream restoration. We're a state leader in prairie restoration. We've restored over 2,000 acres of wetlands, which are a very productive wildlife habitat area. And that's been done. Fortunately, we've been very fortunate in getting lots of grant money for those programs, over $50 million since the turn of the century here for doing that work. One of our goals is to have sustainable populations of all the native species. So those things that belong here in Central Ohio, we want to make sure 100 years from now that they still have a place in Central Ohio where they can live and survive. Some of those are animals that we've had to help bring back, and some of them are frogs. So this is a picture of a wood frog. Wood frogs were wiped out in Franklin County. So here's once upon a time, a common frog species that was completely gone. We've had successfully bringing them back into some of the restored wetlands and other sites here. So we're bringing back some little things like the frogs back to where they belong. Some other things that found their way back on their own, the bald eagles. We have an active nest at High Banks. And that nest is in a spot that's convenient for them to see. Convenient, you have to walk to the overlook deck, but we have the overlook deck over the Olentangy River. You walk back the overlook deck and you can clearly see the eagle's nest. We have 3 baby eagles in the nest right now. It's actually a great time, and I wouldn't wait 2 more weeks. When all the leaves come out in 2 more weeks, you won't be able to see them very well. But if you can get out there this weekend, take your binoculars, you can see the baby eagles from the overlook deck at High Banks. We also have an active nest down at Three Creeks Metroparks. Sandhill cranes were gone from Central Ohio for 150 years. These are not the great blue herons that are common in the river. Sometimes the herons are referred to as cranes. This is a much bigger bird, actually, than the great blue herons. They were gone for a long time from Central Ohio. We now have them nesting in 2 of our metro parks. They found their way back into our restored wetland habitat. So this is a large, dramatic bird that was gone for a long time that has returned. There are smaller, less dramatic things that find their way back because they can fly as well. So we've got some rare dragonflies, we've got some rare butterflies that have also found their way back when we've created the habitat that they used to rely on. Of course, not everything can fly back, and our most dramatic thing that we've brought back in the last few years is the bison. So I mentioned earlier we've restored lots of prairie, but the prairies historically, 200 or more years ago, would have always had large grazing animals as part of their ecosystem, as part of their habitat. And those large grazing animals were important to the success for lots of other things, because otherwise the grasses tend to grow too densely, a crowd thing that makes it unsuitable habitat for some of the things that ought to live there. So we have brought bison back into the prairies at Battelle Darby Creek Metropark. So we have a large compound there. It's not like the zoo. We can't guarantee you'll actually see the bison if you go out there. It's a big enough area. Particularly late. Actually, you could see them now because the grasses are still short. But later in the summer, when the prairie grasses get to be 6 or 8 feet tall, they can hide out there. They can disappear. Now we're trying to address that and make it a little bit more. Two things. First of all, we brought in a male bison last fall. So we've had the bison out there for 4 years. We started with an all-female herd. We working closely with the zoo and the wilds, who The Wilds has a herd out at their facility out on the other side of Zanesville. They were kind enough to give us a small herd of some of their more gentle beasts so that we could learn how to manage a herd of bison. These are true wild bison. The only true wild bison in Ohio are at the zoos, the wilds, and now the Metroparks. The ones on farms are typically hybrids. They're a mixture between cattle and bison, which the farmers have done because the meat's a little more tender and the animals are easier to handle. So these are true wild bison we have. We feel comfortable with them. This past fall we brought in a male, which means this summer we should have baby bison out there. So a lot of people are excited. In fact, our friends group is doing a little contest where if you want you can try to guess the birth date of the first of the baby bison here. So a little bit of contest going on there. One of the things we're going to add, because we realize people go out there to see the bison and aren't always able to in the middle of summer, we're actually installing a bison cam up there. And we're putting in a pole over the area with a camera. The camera is designed so that you can lock it onto an individual, and it's supposed to track that individual animal. So our staff will go in the morning and lock it on one of the baby bison, and the camera will follow the baby bison around the pear prairie. And so that's coming to a Metropark New Year in the near future. So we're excited about the bison. They've been a big hit with people who've had a chance to see an animal that big out running around the fields of Ohio once again. We did it for several reasons. We do think it's good science. That is historically what the prairies of Ohio would have been more like. It's certainly been good public relations. We've gotten an awful lot of publicity on it. It's also very good education. One of the things we realized, we were taking kids out there, showing them our prairies, and they were so distant from whatever else they could relate to that they often got, they didn't know. They saw, it's tall grass, it's wonderful wildflower displays. What else you got? You put a bison in there, and all of a sudden they're fascinated and want to spend more time. It gives us more opportunity to talk about why this was an important part of Central Ohio and our history here. Other species of concern, we do lots of work with rare species. Not all of them are glamorous. Northern river shell is a mussel, clam if you will. We are the location where the federal government is putting their last best hope into saving this animal. So there's one stream in Pennsylvania where that animal is healthy. That's it. We had them still in Darby Creek. We are working with the federal government. They want to make sure they have two healthy populations. The Darby Creek is the site where the federal government is making their efforts to save this species. So we have Darby Creek, if you're not familiar with it, many, many rare species. It is recognized not only in Central, really it's in the naturalist community. It's well known. It is considered, Nature Conservancy calls it one of the last great places in the Western Hemisphere. It has far greater diversity of fish and mussels and other species than almost any other streams. So it's been less impacted by people than most streams, and therefore has an awful lot of things left. Still 100 species of fish in the stream. And lots of mussels. And just to put in perspective, in Battelle Darby Creek Metro Park, we have over 80 species of fish you can still find in that park. That's more species of freshwater fish than you can find in California, Oregon, and Washington combined. We have more species of mussel in that park than they have in Africa and Europe combined. So in terms of those kind of things, we have great diversity, lots of rare species, and so we are a lead agency in trying to protect many of these rare species. Part of what we do, I mentioned earlier, is our habitat restoration efforts, and we're ongoing efforts. So here's some of our results from last year. So more prairie, more wetlands still being restored, still working to create those kind of habitats that would have been common in Central Ohio 200 years ago, and making great places for people to visit, to see, to experience, see all the wildlife that attracts. And of course, that makes a great habitat for wildlife as well. And with that, I'd like to just stop and open up for questions. And so we'll start over this time.
To what extent are invasive species a problem? Animal and flora.
Invasive species are a significant problem. For those not familiar with it,
neat picture.
The invasive species, the ones we worry about, ones that replace the native, so they can take over areas, eliminate the native species, and those are the ones we are most concerned with. And those can be either animals or plants. Bush honeysuckle is one that you probably have in your backyard, right? And if you have any woods, it's taken over, and it will completely take over the understory of the woods and eliminate all the wildflowers and other shrubs in there. So that's an example of one. So invasive species are a problem. We do attack it heavily. We have a full-time person whose job is to fight invasive species. We get lots of other people, lots of volunteers involved in that as well. So it's an ongoing effort by us to keep the natural habitats here dominated by the species that belong here. Yes?
Will the bison cam be on the internet?
Not initially. The plan is, yes, it will be. Initially, it's going to be piped into the Nature Center. We're working on some technological problems with it. The original setup, we don't have a strong enough connection, a strong enough technology, if you will, to put on the internet. We think if we did that, it would crash the very first day. So right now, it's going to be piped into the Nature Center. If you haven't been to Nature, we have a very, very large screen in there that is part of it's a great one of the exhibits in there, and so we're going to put it on those screens at times. We also have an interactive TV screen, if you will, that'll be on at all times for this summer. So we have some technology for this summer, but right now it's a remote location that does not have the technology. So we're working on how do we get it so that we can put it on the internet without crashing our system. Yes.
Yeah, I have a question about the general approach to forest management. I think you used the adjective natural during your presentation, and just to me, and I'm a frequent visitor to the parks, I very much appreciate what you're doing. But I recently spent a sabbatical year in Germany, went to parks, forests and parks often there, and they seem to have a different approach. You know, they actually do selective extraction of timber right in their parks and so forth. Here, the approach is as you suggest, natural, but I just wonder about brush fire risks, forest fire risks, and so forth with dead vegetation lying around, and insect risks. And so, what's the balance there?
Yeah, and so we do strive for the natural balance as opposed to the managed balance. The forests of Germany are well known; they're intensely managed. Of course, now they have to fertilize them. They don't have enough nutrients being recycled that if they to grow trees, they have to fertilize their forest. But they've been doing that for they've been doing that since before we were a country. Yeah. So they've been managing intensively. They have a shortage of lumber products in that part of the world. We don't actually have. We're actually growing more lumber now than we are harvesting. The insect is but the insect issues right now are introduced insects. Emerald ash borer is doing terrible damage. That's a Chinese species that was brought, accidentally reduced, wiping out our ash trees right now. So the insect issues are introduced invasive species. Going back to the other question, they're creating tremendous problem. The fire risk in Ohio is generally not considered high. I wouldn't say that if we lived in Colorado or California, but for Ohio, forest fires are very rare comparatively. So there's not a huge risk. We light fires in our prairies. We get forest management. We're one of the because we're a lead agent in prairie restoration. We're also a part of the burn teams for the state of Ohio. So we do intentionally start some fires in our prairies, not in our forests. We have not had a forest fire.
Historically, though, going back before to prehistory, fires were part of the natural scheme.
Absolutely.
Here, and I always wonder, when I look at what a logger would consider a trashed up forest with all these logs hanging around and so forth, or on the forest floor, and what would happen if a fire started in the high banks, is arguably could be called natural.
And I will tell you, parts of high banks and much more parts of prairie oaks and Battelle Darby, there's lots of evidence that her current habitats were influenced by fires. So the fires were not thousands of years ago. The fires were less than 100 years ago.
Set by Indians too.
They were set intentionally by Indians. They also naturally occurring fire from lightning and other strikes. Then they often spread a long distance. Now there's roads every even in the country they're every mile. And they're a lot closer. There's barriers to ease these things. We get enough rain that they're not that dry most years. Could still happen. You can't rule it out, but it's not an ongoing major concern, I guess.
All right, one more question.
What are you doing lately with respect to deer herd management?
We actively manage our deer herd in almost all of our parks. So certainly what happened at Sharon Woods made lots and lots of news for those of you who lived here for a long time. we actively manage, which means we cull the deer herds in most of our parks every year. So the typical deer has 2 or 3 young, female has 2 or 3 young every year, so the populations grow rapidly. For those not familiar with it, we reached a point in Sharon Woods, most notably, with some other places where we had no vegetation left within 5 feet of ground, which meant we had none of the animals, none of the birds that lived within 5 feet of ground. They were all gone. All the things that fed on those animals that lived on or near the ground were gone. So we had a system in collapse from a biological standpoint. So we do manage those herds. We allow public hunting actually in 3 of our parks, 3 of our more rural parks. So we do it a variety of different ways. We cull them with our own staff. We are the largest provider of fresh meat to the Central Ohio Food Bank. So all the deer we harvest are processed and fed to the hungry. But it's an ongoing problem. It will continue forever because they breed rapidly. And we've got great habitat.
Could you talk afterwards? Answer
Absolutely.
any questions?
Great.
Thank you very much. Thank you so much for your presentation. In recognition of that, our club is going to donate a book in your name to one of the schools at which some of our members do tutoring.
Great.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay.